Hello everybody, my name is Alex Merced, and what I want to do is talk about the role of a moral philosophical framework when it comes to sort of a worldview. A lot of times people think that delving too much in philosophy, you get too much detached from reality, but I think it's very important to have a philosophical and moral framework, which is why I'm very big on talking about sort of libertarian principles and libertarian philosophy and its application. Okay, so while the world is complex, the problem is you can come up with all sorts of different things that are arguable from a sort of utilitarian standpoint. But when you sit there and determine, okay, this is a good thing, what do you do to bring that good thing to the world? What sets those boundaries? How far can you go? That's where morality and philosophy comes into play. So for example, if there was no moral, no philosophy, no sort of framework to set boundaries, we could theoretically say, well, you know what, everyone's better off if they brush their teeth. So, you know what, it would be legally fine, or it would be morally fine to just mandate that everyone brushes their teeth. So it's okay for us to send people with guns into your house, to put a gun up to your head to make sure that you brush your teeth. Because you know what, everyone's better off if their teeth are healthy. It's good to make sure that you take a shower and practice good hygiene. It's okay to use violence to force you to do that because hygiene is good. So yes, if everyone has better hygiene, that's a good thing. But I think everyone would agree that using force to force people to practice good hygiene goes beyond a boundary. So even if you don't have a clear moral philosophical boundary because you haven't spent as much time with morality and philosophy, those boundaries exist in the way you think. Where basically there's a boundary to how far you're willing to go to push for a utilitarian end. So you can't think purely in utilitarian terms. There has to be some sort of framework for setting those boundaries. And that's where things like the principles of self-ownership and non-aggression play in the libertarian world. It's not that if you sit there and say, hey, this study says this is a good thing, this study says this is a bad thing, that we ignore the results of the study and we're just saying la 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 la. But the thing is, there are boundaries and defined parameters because of a moral philosophical framework that define these are proper ways, proper means for achieving ends. And the ends don't necessarily justify the means, as in the example with the toothbrush. And there are people out there who say, hey, I'm purely libertarian on utilitarian grounds and I don't care about the principle. But even they would probably agree with my former analogy. So they have, even those who try to deny the philosophy, and then just say, hey, I'm just doing this out of a purely practical matter. And, libertarianism just practically works and just makes sense. From a practical standpoint, there are moral boundaries within them too, whether they, want to recognize it or not. We all have these boundaries that are determined by our philosophical framework, which may be more refined in some than others, depending on what effort you've made to, refine your framework. But that's the importance. That's why the non-aggression principle is important, or the self-ownership principle is important. It's not because it's absolute. Nothing is absolute. There's no but it helps define those boundaries. And the reason why I think the NAP, the non-aggression principle, and the self-ownership principle are better than other principles is because they're simple. Okay, other people try to come up with really complex ways of defining where those boundaries are. The problem is, the more complex it is, the easier it is for someone to sort of argue something that you originally did not intend into that framework. Okay, that's kind of like what's happened with the Constitution. And the Constitution was fairly simple. And even then, look at all the things that have been argued into the realm of what government can do that were not part of the original intention of the U.S. Constitution. And that was still a lot simpler than most other frameworks. So simple is good because it makes it harder to distort. So it's simple to say, you own yourself. But then you open up the door to so many things when you start saying you own yourself, but in this situation that, but in this situation that, the degree, this is this and this and that. Then you start saying, well, that's similar to this situation, so this thing that I want to happen, you open the door. Non-aggression principle is very simple to say. If you own yourself, then you have a claim over your life and body and any property that you justly come across. So I have no claim, I have no rightful right to use violence on your life, body, and property. It's simple, it's elegant, it's such a fairly clear boundary that even then people try to manipulate those boundaries. And that's as simple as you get. Okay? So to make it more complex, make moral frameworks more complex, just invites even more distortion. So that's why I like the NAP. I like the self-ownership principle, not because there's some sort of absolute divine reason for it to be so, but it's because it's one that it's easier to live by and easier to uphold, easier to keep its integrity. So hopefully this got you thinking a little bit more about the role of morality, philosophy. Also got you more thinking about what the role of a principle is and how it functions and whatnot. So my name is Alex Merced from alexmerced.com. If you like this video, please share it, tell your friends about it, subscribe to my podcast, the YouTube channel, all that stuff. We're always trying to put out quality content out there, mainly to get you guys to think deeper about these issues, to clarify our ability to communicate on these issues, because we all benefit from that. So why not? So you guys have a great day.